that is probably the most work that I and we have ever done as a team, ever. In fact, I think we're still recovering from this application. But before that, I wanted to share a quick little video that Morton put together for us that is sort of what we did this past year, because we didn't get to share that with you as much as we'd like to have. I think we only had one tour, so it was a pretty strange year not having lots of tours and lots of people around. So we'll just share a video with you. So despite the fact that COVID was around, we were still quite busy. Actually, it's the biggest year that we've ever had for Farming Smarter, over 108 research trials. And throughout all of that, we were quite fortunate that we were able to get our work done, despite the drought as well. You know, really trying to figure out where to put things. This is the guys getting seed ready, and we had a really tremendous team, a really great group of people. We managed to make it through the whole year without anybody getting sick as well, so pretty happy about that. And everybody had a lot of fun too, so we were quite blessed to be in agriculture, to be able to go to work, to get outside and implement all of these amazing trials that will eventually add value. Some of them fail, but that's also helpful too, so that you don't go and do the same crazy, stupid things that we like to try out. You know, there's lots of failure in agriculture, and I think that's really about how we learn the most. And we call ourselves Farming Smarter, but a lot of times we're farming pretty damn dumb so that you don't have to. Everything from small plot trials to Lewis's field scale trials. We were out working with farmers on a number of field scale trials, looking at the precision planters in a real life setting. We did acquire a new piece of land, actually. If you saw some weird mess going on around Pratt and Whitney, they've actually now got us taking care of that land. So we're doing research trials right in the city. Despite the fact that it snows, we continue to work, and a lot of great things that happened this year, and I think that you'll be able to share in some of the findings from the speakers later on, with Mike and Grabir and Trevor and Lewis and the rest of this conference. But brand new seeder there. We have a whole new expansion for Farming Smarter. It doesn't look as impressive as your new seeder, but you know, that was a huge investment for us. We were happy to get a grant from the WGRF to pay for half of that. So basically doubles our capacity to do research trials. And we also were, you will see a picture of it later, we were also able to acquire a new plot combine, and it costs just about as much as your combine as well. So again, happy to get the grant, and not only are we able to expand on our efficiencies and the work that we do, but we're even going to use it for field scale trials too, because we're finding that it's a real challenge with yield maps and all that to get great data, and even weigh wagons. And so we're going to take that combine out to farmers' fields. We gave it a test run this year and just take strips out of the strips that they have. Trevor lost his keys and Sarah needed a shower there. Another big new project was actually more work with the Seed Alfalfa Commission, and Trevor and both Lewis were working on various different projects within things like managing weevils and looking at desiccants. So that was a new partnership that we were continuing to develop. In fact, they were happy enough and to even support our living lab financially. They were probably the biggest supporters of our lab. So it's great to reach out and work with different groups of farmers. And all of that kind of ties into our living lab proposal as well. So lots of activities, lots of smiley faces. Thank God for irrigation, or we would have had nothing as well for our trials. So we did have to bring out a lot of emergency irrigation. Even Trevor put water tanks and built a boom and started to salvage some of our trials, because we don't have crop insurance for research trials, but we were managed to keep most of our trials and get good data from it. So overall, despite the drought, we were pretty successful. We didn't lose a lot. We were collecting data that we're still crunching, and one of the other milestones that were happening is Grabir actually just published one of our studies on the precision planter in the Canadian Journal of Science. So we're not just doing the applied research now, we're getting that peer review piece and joining that realm and helping increase the science and quality of the work that we're doing. So hope you enjoyed our quick little 4-minute tour of everything that we were up to, and I sure hope that next year you guys can join us in the fields for some more live events. So I want to introduce this idea of an innovation system, because we always think about different components. We think about research as one thing. I'd rather look at an innovation system. And I think this is important because, well, as I'm going to tell you in the next slide, is I think our system is broken. And we talk about connection, and I think everything that we do, we have to be connected for everything to work the way it should. And so for here, we have like an agricultural research system. That's just the tool, the scientists, the research trials, and so on. But the farmers are always the center focus. But we have to think of the extension system. This is what's really broken and continues to break down. And despite the fact that we would like to have done a better job, and we do as much as we can online and virtually and such, if you don't have that personal component to extension, the cheerleading, you know, the minding of melds and being able to come up with new ideas and figure out how to explore new opportunities and innovation. So this extension system needs to be functioning, but we also need that educational system. And I'm actually quite happy that Bernie, he took off, didn't he? Right when I was going to mention him. But the Lethbridge College is launching a new degree program for agriculture students in agronomy, and I'm really excited about that starting next year, because we haven't had, honestly, a strong presence in the educational piece in Southern Alberta. So I think that as we start building these different components of the system, I think overall things are going to improve. So that's the knowledge system is within those three realms, but then we have all these other players that are part of the system. And this is simplistic, but it gives you a good picture of the different players, that, you know, the producers, the exporters, the marketers, and then it's all sort of, I don't want to say supported, but regulated and through government policy and the framework. So to frame the discussion, then, I would propose that we do have some problems. I mentioned that system is broken. I don't think we think of it as a system anymore, but we need to. Interesting where Jeff, the previous speaker, was talking about silos, the us and the them. You know, there are a lot of that within agriculture. We're competitive amongst ourselves, even though we're in the same industry. And I think that does need to continue, but we need to also find ways where it makes sense to work together. Right now, I think government is focused on cuts. We went through some pretty major cuts in agriculture. We're still seeing the impact and the trickle-down effects of that. There's a creation of a new organization, ARDAR, but one of the challenges with that right now is that they're only focused on projects, not on programs and not on systems. Farmers, they're often most focused on their own farms, and for the most part, that's a good thing. That's what you need to be doing. But there has been a big change in the last 10 to 15 years where we don't share information with each other. And, you know, we have to also continue to find ways to work together. So I do believe that there are some solutions to these problems, and I'm excited about this living lab concept. It's not dissimilar from what we've been working towards as an organization, but there are some added benefits to it. So I do think that if we can find a way to make these concepts work and invest in meaningful collaboration, far too often we talk about collaboration and we walk out the door and we go back to doing things by ourselves. The other thing that I think we need to do is to be able to empower regional leadership and regional focus, and to support programs with projects, not just projects. And I think continue focusing on the farm, but find ways to work together. So we applied for a federal grant for these living labs through the Agriculture Climate Solutions Program. And we were awarded $100,000 to write a proposal. This is the first time I've ever been paid to write a proposal. Unfortunately, I think we lost money because we put so much work into this. We were so excited. It really did breathe new life into our organization, because, you know, we can kind of get down when you start building something and then all of your grants disappear and you no longer have access to them. So there were 3 of these awarded within the province, and we were competitive towards, I think, getting 2 of them in our province. They started out in Eastern Canada, and now they're working on getting living labs set up in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. So we were secretly told that we were awarded this phase 1 in August. And then not too long after that, there was a federal election called, and within that, the caretaker convention said they can no longer talk to us. So we're awarded this grant. to let you know, the grant is 5 years to start and an $8 million grant. And it's also renewable for another 5 years. So we've never had the opportunity for such a long-term sustainable approach. So it was pretty exciting. So we won this, but yet they can't tell us anything. We can't tell you anything. And somehow we have to build this huge proposal. So we did end up hiring Collaborative Strategies, Mandy DeCecco Kalababa. See, it took me about a month to learn her name. And Wow Communications to help us design this approach. And within that, we started off conducting a 2-day strategic planning session with our board, with some selected guests, to sort of just brainstorm, come up with some goals, and to be able to create the framework of our project. And then after that, we hosted 6 producer and partner meetings, both virtually and live across southern Alberta. So I mentioned the ACS grant. They're focused on climate change, and that's what our government is looking at. And right now, they want to hit 30% below 2005 levels. And so they've targeted their priorities as carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas mitigation. This may not be exciting to you, but the good thing is in agriculture, everything relates. So we can tie that to everything that we do in a pretty meaningful way. They have 3 core concepts for the Living Lab. And believe it or not, the first one is focusing on farmer needs. And that's actually a revelation. So imagine that we're actually going to focus on farmers' needs with a government grant. And I was pretty excited about that. The second one is pretty simple, broad and diverse partnerships and relationships. So they want to see a multidisciplinary approach. That means we're not just focusing on science. Whether you adopt a new practice, science is a tool to get you there, but it's not the only tool. There's lots of different cultural impacts, there's risk, there's financial impacts. So we have to look at every angle to be successful with this. And then they're encouraging testing in real life context. So again, we need to work together at the farm level to come up with ideas, to come up with approaches, and they use language like co-design, co-develop, and so on. And again, very practical, pragmatic approach to addressing a problem. They also like to talk about the idea of design thinking, so a BMP, best management practice. Is it desirable at the human level? Does it make sense? Is it economically viable, and is it technically feasible? So then we want to play in the sweet spot, and somebody puts a 3-circled slide together, and you always want the middle. And they also like to take an adaptive, iterative approach. When we're working in scientific projects, the whole traditional approach is scientist comes up with an idea, go test it for 3 years, come back and tell me if it works. And that doesn't really always lend itself well to agriculture. So I like the fact that they're considering more of an adaptive approach and an iterative approach. So as we move from conception to prototyping to development, we're making those iterations. We're talking with each other, we're testing, and we're changing as we go. So it's kind of more about the way that you would in a more of a R&D development type approach. So here's a few sort of feedback slides and a little bit of focus onto what we were working on with our consultations. And this is the report from Mandy's company. So our first goal is quite simple. We want to increase organic matter, and the way we do that is by increasing the amount of carbon that we put back in the soil. So that comes from either growing more biomass or more carbon-rich type crops. And the popular trend these days is cover crops. So this is about 45 or 48 people that voted on cover crops, but I don't know if any of you have tried cover crops under dryland drought conditions. It doesn't work too well. And so I think there's less opportunity along that front as there might be under irrigation, because I don't know if you guys saw, but the highway was closed the other day because soil was blowing, and there was an accident somewhere between here and Tabor. So there is an immediate need for us to improve our game, especially under irrigation. Cover crops might be a solution. It's not the only solution. I still think winter crops is a better approach. Anytime we can increase ground cover is a good thing. We're adding more carbon to the soil, we're holding the soil. Second strategy there was to increase our use of perennial crops like alfalfa, or high biomass crops like hemp or corn. We want to be able to improve our production under marginal land. So if we have salinity issues, a great way to sequester carbon is to figure out how to get things to grow or to manage the salinity. And then a less popular option is soil amendment. So that's things like biochar and manure. You just don't have the availability. But there still might be some opportunity along that front. So this whole exercise is really about prioritizing what matters to farmers. If it doesn't matter to them, then the likelihood of us, getting any adoption in that front isn't there. So that's what the whole point of this. So first goal is just increasing organic matter. Our second goal is looking back at reduced tillage, conservation practices. Now we've come a long way, especially under dry land, not so much under irrigation. But reduced tillage practices, had about 22 people that were, thinking that that's still a priority. The second one is just looking at soil metrics, looking at digital ways of measuring erosion and understanding the complicated parts of soil structure and learn a little bit more along that front. But the biggest one was really how do we deal with the erosion mitigation, and particularly under irrigation. But we're still seeing some issues in dry land. I mean, I saw more erosion dry land this year in sloughs that were dry and then blowing. Not much we could do about that. And then minimal interest in the agroforestry. So this is back to shelter belts, but there are still some wins in shelter belts that we're going to evaluate. So looking at beneficials, and one of the neater ones is actually using willows for salinity management. Our third goal is simply agronomy and how we tie that into carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas. Well, agronomy is really the study of energy efficiency in crop production. So we'll use that language for them, but we'll talk about basic agronomy to you. One of the fastest and easiest ways to improve on carbon sequestration is just growing more legumes, so more alfalfa, more pulse crops. And that's a really easy way to hit those targets. So if we're concerned about federal policies of 30% reduction in fertilizers, well, 30% of your crops in these, you've already done it. It's not that hard to accomplish. But fertilizer management, one of the most intensive and expensive parts of agriculture is fertilizer management. So a lot of interest in continuing to improve on that. And IPM strategies is still important. It may be difficult to see where managing weeds or insects relates to carbon sequestration, but you just have to think about what happens with glyphosate-tolerant kochia, and now we're looking at losing the progress that we've made under zero tillage, or perhaps having to go back to tillage to control these types of weeds. So preserving the practices that we have is probably just as important as creating new ones. So for the fourth exploration, we're talking about precision agriculture and digital agriculture. It's one that gets talked about a lot, but maybe won't be surprised, but it's the lowest priority out of all of them. So a certain amount of people are still interested in variable nitrogen, a little bit more interest in variable rate irrigation, much less interest in variable rate pesticides, and then, good still interest in sort of the Internet of Things. That's the digital ag piece. When we ranked all of those goals, the two most important were the enhancing organic matter and agronomy. They were tied for first. Second was focusing on reduced soil erosion, and third was that precision agriculture. So then with that information, we decided to build our proposal. Within that, we also looked at barriers to adoption, and there's all kinds of different barriers, and it was quite interesting to hear from the different farmers some of the challenges, and a lot of times it was risk. It was just mentality. We tried it once, I don't want to go there again. There's tradition, there's culture, moving targets, watching for trends, knowing when to jump in and not, and all those different types of things that we need to consider. In the end, our goal is to come up with better management practices and get them adopted. Everything that we did fell into about 4 themes. There was the environmental soil health, farmer buy-in, that's cost and ROI. There's the research and extension component, and then there's policy. So we have to respond to policy sometimes, but maybe we'll have the opportunity to inform policy. So this very large proposal I'm telling you about, we had to cancel Christmas for this one. So part of that was the date was extended because of the caretaker convention and the election, but when we finally submitted, we were quite surprised to find out it was 396 pages long. We had 35 letters of support. We engaged with 20 scientists on probably about 60 different research trials. We're working with 12 agronomists, 50 farmers, and this is over 5 years, 100 field scale trials and 132 small plot trials. So although it was adaptive in nature, they still wanted us to present the framework of what we're going to do over the next 5 years. Of all the activities, one of the interesting things that I think we're trying to develop is 10 different field tested hubs across southern Alberta. And that is going to tailor to the uniqueness of the area, of the culture, and other different components, whether you have irrigation or not. We also have 2 socioeconomic activities, 7 research activities for us, 8 from Ag Canada Science. We've got a really comprehensive knowledge transfer program. We've even got an Indigenous partner with Siksika Nation. And we're going to work with that degree program because part of that degree is a research experience. So we're going to get all of the college students involved in these projects. On the extension front, we have 150 extension events planned, including sort of pop-up tours on farmers' fields. We're going to do a dedicated magazine, lots of podcasts, news posts, and all of that other fancy stuff. I'm going to show you a really ugly slide. This is basically our entire living lab on one Venn diagram approach. But don't worry, I learned a fancy function on PowerPoint so I can zoom in. So that's just showing all the different partners, and I really do appreciate everybody that engaged in this. Like I said, 35 letters of support, and working from southern Alberta all the way up to Peace River. So we are focused on southern Alberta, but we've got U of A on board. We've got groups in the Peace River. We've got companies, hemp companies, and individual farmers, McCain's, you name it. So it was pretty exciting to see the interest. I mentioned that knowledge transfer piece. So we've got 3 programs, which would include hiring a new coordinator to help keep all of these partnerships together. The lock and load is just delivering all of the events that we're doing. Shout It Out Loud as a component where we want to sell this story. This is actually a great branding opportunity to improve public perception of what we're doing. Gather the Champions is about getting farm influencers. So some of you guys that are out there that are here are farm influencers. We want you to be advocates for what you're doing, be involved in the events, be involved in the research. So we really are hoping to get as much collaboration on this as possible. And then we're going to keep it on track, and that means that we're going to reevaluate all of these projects with you. We want to make sure that we're getting together, and we're going to have expert working committees on various different areas that you may be interested in. So if you're interested in cover crops or soil health or strip tillage or agronomy, then you can participate in these on a yearly basis. As far as the details of the different projects, I mentioned those field hubs that we were going to work on. So far, our proposed areas is to have one with Siksika, one in the foremost area, one with the Hutterite colony, more of the irrigated crops in Tabor and Bow Island, and then our fellows, friends in Brooks. Oh, look, I got Ryan Mercer even, so that's Lethbridge. Up in Enchant, we're going to work with Cara out of Oyen as another hub, and then sort of that feedlot farm type approach. One of the things Lewis is going to do is work on helping farmers develop their own on-farm nitrogen response curves. That's the simplest way for you guys to really tailor in nitrogen applications. Anyone watching time? All right. Thanks, buddy. So for our side of things, we've got a whole bunch of different research projects that we put in there. We're looking at double cropping on the feedlot side of things. We're looking at winter cereals and forages. We're going to reevaluate some of those high erosion type crops like dry beans and potatoes, hail recropping, strip tillage, looking at hemp fiber now, continue our work on precision pulses, and we've actually, I see another Ken here with Western Ag Innovations, working on more winter crops again. We're back into looking at winter pulses and lentils and faba beans and oats and you name it, because we do think that those winter crops have a great opportunity. One of the great things that you'll hear from Dr. Ben Ellert, he was our co-PI on this, but in addition to $1 million a year that would come through Farming Smarter, we're able to direct around $600,000 a year of Ag Canada science. So we've got 12 Ag Canada scientists. I see Kay Shevs at the back was part of it there, and Jonathan will be speaking as well. So they're going to be looking at winter cereals. Hector's going to look at shelter belts. Shama is also here. We're going to look at more disease types, crop sequences for Phantomyces. We're going to try to get better suited forages for our marginal lands with the new breeder that Harry Budell is replacing Cereacheria. We're going to use willows study willows to manage salinity. Charles Getty's looking at cover crop and intercropping. And Ben and Roland and Keisha are going to help us figure out how to measure it all. And then we've got Emma Stevens from Ag Canada as well, looking at the socioeconomic piece. And we've got Willemine and Resvan with the college, looking at fertigation. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the most of what we're looking at. Since I only have 3 minutes, I'm skipping that one. I've mentioned where the field hubs are. I'm excited about the field hubs because this is going to force us to get out more and to really understand the uniqueness of each farm. Like farming in southern Alberta is so diverse from one end of the province to the other, and I think that delving more into really what matters and foremost versus Clarisholm is such an important aspect of what we're doing, and I think this Living Lab will enable us to do a way better job of that. So just to sum it up, I'll bring back those 2 slides. I feel like the innovation system is broken, that we are siloed, that even on the government front, we have a lack of leadership, we have a lack of connectedness, and sometimes farmers need to lift their heads up and look at the bigger picture too. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity. I'm pretty stupid for presenting something that I haven't been approved either. So wish us our best on this one, please, because I think it really has legs. In fact, even if we aren't awarded this grant, I think we're going to have to try to find a way to make it happen anyways, because I think it really is the right approach. And I think the other thing is just empowering the regionality of our province. So thank you, and thank you from our staff, and thank you to my staff for a fantastic year, and we're gearing up for another great year and look forward to actually seeing you all. It's such a lot of fun working with everybody. We actually are probably going to be hiring more, so if you have any students that are looking for jobs this summer, give us a shout. This is one of our staff photos that one of the students decided to draw all of us. And for any of you guys have seen this guy on Twitter, I'm going to end it with a rain dance, so you guys better learn this one and dance it often. So if anyone wants to come up here and play along, and now it's not going to play.